Hey guys, I want to do a quick video to kind of help you prepare for submitting Part 2, the developmental assessment portion of the child assessment project. I know I went over the whole project, and I also went over just Part 2, the expectations of how you need to proceed with Part 2. In this video, I want to talk about being sure you understand what to submit and being sure that you understand how to write your reflection. Okay, so let's take a look at the assignment again. We are focused on Part 2 here. This is an overview of Part 2. The 5 observations that you need to do. In the first observation, you're doing the developmental checklist from the Centers for Disease Control. In the other 4 observations, you're observing, you're collecting anecdotal notes, short notes, you're collecting running records, longer, more detailed notes, and you are collecting artifacts, which can be pictures, videos, work samples, and if you have a work sample, you obviously are probably just going to be taking a picture of that as well. You don't actually have to take it from the classroom. Something that I want to be sure everybody understands, read this part right here. It says a minimum of 4 anecdotal notes and 4 running records are required and should address all developmental domains. Be sure that you have at least 1 anecdotal note from the physical development domain, 1 from language, 1 from cognitive, and 1 from social emotional. Remember we talked about running records may cover more than 1 domain, but in your 4 running records that you turn in, you need to be sure each domain is covered. It may be covered multiple times in multiple notes, but you want to be sure that each is aligned to that domain. Same thing with your artifacts. You need to have an artifact that shows physical development, an artifact that shows language development, an artifact that shows cognitive development, and one that shows social and emotional development. So make sure you're thinking in that aspect of representing each domain. Along with the anecdotal notes, running records, and artifacts you've collected and how you've interpreted them and aligned them to the developmental domains, you are going to submit a developmental assessment reflection. There is a clear description here of what that developmental assessment reflection needs to encompass, and this reflection should be 1 to 2 pages long. Okay, it is at least 1 page. Some of you, it may take you 2 pages to do that. You're reflecting on this process, and there are some guiding questions here that you need to be sure you address in this. That doesn't mean bullet them out and answer them one by one, but as you're thinking about and reflecting on this process, just be sure that you address all of these questions in your writing. Here are the questions. Describe how the strategies you used were ethically grounded, developmentally ability, culturally, and linguistically appropriate to document developmental progress and promote positive outcomes for this child. So how were your assessment methods inclusive and culturally sensitive, and how overall does this authentic type of assessment always fall into that category? So be sure you talk about that, the importance of that in your reflection. What components of the assessment process were most informative and helpful? What aspects of the assessment process were the most challenging? Which domains were more difficult to document? Was it easy for you to get into the habit of doing the running records and anecdotal notes? But just reflect on how this process felt to you, and just overall what you learned from this process about developmental assessment and the importance of it, and most importantly, the importance of authentic assessment, how this is more inclusive than taking a test and being able to answer the questions on the test. So I hope this video is helpful. Last thing I do want to show you is the rubric for Part 2. I will be using this rubric for grading just like I used a rubric for part 1 that was also available to you. This is available to you in Blackboard. You can see here, I'm going to be looking specifically that you used a developmental checklist and that you filled it out appropriately and that you used the one that we asked you to use, the CDC checklist. I'm going to be looking to see that all of your anecdotal notes have the date and time on them and the area in which the observation occurred, and that they all align to a developmental domain or learning area: physical, cognitive, social, emotional, language. I am going to be looking at your running record and seeing that all of your running records have a date and time, an area, and also a developmental domain aligned to it. And remember, your running records are probably going to have more than one, but they need to be aligned to developmental domains. Same thing for the artifacts that you are collecting. I'm going to be looking for one to be represented from each developmental domain, and I'm also going to be looking for an explanation of how it does. If you take a picture, you're going to have to provide a little bit of context and talk about what developmental domain you see demonstrated in that picture. And then overall, I will be evaluating how well your notes are aligned to developmental domains. I'll be looking to see that if you write a note and you say it's cognitive development, does it truly align to cognitive development? Are you collecting evidence that truly represents that developmental domain and where that child is developmentally? The last thing that I will be evaluating is your developmental assessment reflection. For full credit for this, you need to have a thorough reflection that describes in detail how authentic assessment practices were followed and how observations and other tools are ethically grounded in developmentally ability and linguistically appropriate. So you want to be sure to address that in your developmental assessment reflection. What is the benefit of using authentic assessment practices? I hope this video has been helpful, and good luck. Please reach out if you have any questions at all.